The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMZ.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Humanity First. My name is Peter Evers, your host, and today we're going to talk about parenting. It's one of those things that is the greatest joy in life for many people, but for others it's an amazing struggle, and there are many, many reasons for that. And parenting in the modern day has its own difficulties as well when we think about it. You know, we've just had Thanksgiving, we're coming up on the holiday period, we've just spent time with our families. And families aren't always the wonderful thing that you see on the television around this time of year. And we're held to very high standards. We hold ourselves to high standards in parenting. But there are things that can go wrong. And oftentimes that really, things like serious emotional disturbance in kids, anxiety disorders, which are growing incredibly in leaps and bounds over the last years, put strains on families. Of course, the separation rate in our society is very high as well, around 50%. So you're dealing with single parents, you're dealing with families who are blended, and all of those issues come with it. So we're going to talk today with Heather Hogan, who is the director of the BAMZ Parent Information Network, which incidentally had its 30-year anniversary, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we're going to talk about what kind of support we can offer to parents who are going through difficult times, and give a few hints about how to survive parenthood. And I don't really mean it that way, because it is the most wonderful thing in the world to raise your children, but to deny the fact that it is difficult and it is challenging. And there are so many things in this culture, not least the advent of the phone and all of the things that brings with it, and they need to regulate that, and the worries that parents have about children's use of the internet and the possibility that they might be prey, are all things that increase our own level of anxiety as we go through the journey of parenting. So stick around, we're going to talk to Heather Hogan next.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm an essential worker here at BAMZ, and I'm a nurse. Nurses are essential here at BAMZ because as nurses, we really have the opportunity to make an impact. We have very small ratios, so we have the opportunity to really learn everything about the person served and be able to give the best care. It really serves such a great purpose for me as being a nurse, and really why I came into nursing. Learn more about nursing opportunities at bamzjobs.org.
Giving a voice to the voiceless, pulling stories out of the shadows and putting them under the spotlight, making sure that each person is valued and cared for. This is Humanity First with Peter Evers, presented by BAMZ.
And welcome back, everybody, to Humanity First. And as promised in the first half of the show, we have Heather Hogan with us again. Heather, hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm doing well, thanks.
Yeah, and so for those people who don't know Heather, and I think everybody knows Heather, I go through life thinking that. Heather is the director of our Parent Information Network, and has been on the show before, and it really is great to speak to an expert in all things parenting. And I always say this, Heather, but I love when you introduce me to speak at events, because you lead with the fact that I'm a parent. And when you think about it, that's one of the most important things in your life. And I always appreciate that. But I also, as I said before at the beginning of the show, this is not an easy assignment. You know, there was a joke about it, really, like that you go through all of these chores, and you do it for nothing, and eventually your kids go through a phase where they don't like you, which actually is very normal in terms of separation. But hey, let's kick off by having a conversation about PIN, because I know it's so dear to your heart. It's been a program that's been around for 30 years. We had our celebration the other night, which just was a wonderful event. what's the thumbnail for PIN?
Well, PIN is an amazing organization that did start 30 years ago, and it was started to help support families who had children with mental health needs. And we continue that work covering the whole Southeast area of Massachusetts. And really, we are just there to be support, encouragement, resources, and guidance to families who are struggling raising their child with a mental health need. And we're also a resource to the community because any parent can call if they have concerns about their child. No barriers.
Yeah,
and we don't require insurance, and it's so easy to access, and you can be a one-time parent or you can stay with us. I've been at PIN for 16 years, and I have parents who have been with us for 16 years.
Yeah, just in terms of access, because I love that. Actually, I was talking at one of our other programs a few minutes ago, and the wonderful thing about that young adult program is there's no barriers to access. Every program should be like that. If you ask me, you shouldn't have to go through eligibility because every parent struggles with this. I know. Yep. How best to find out information? I know I quite often mention BAMSI.org, BAMSI.org. Any other phone number or anything you want to share?
Yeah, so we can share the phone number, which is 508-947-8779, extension 210, or we have an email address for the program. It's pin@bmz.org.
Wow, that's easy.
Very easy. We like it to be easy. We don't want to cause any stress to the families that we're working with. So
sorry to interrupt you, but I think what's important is, and I say this a lot, that lived experience is the sort of golden key in a way in terms of when you think about behavioral health, mental health issues, and substance use disorder issues as well. We transformed our system when we realized that walking with somebody who has been through this process and has got to the other side is such an important thing. That's a key element in this program, right?
It is the key. All of our staff are parents with lived experience. So we're coming to the work having walked the walk, and we have a staff of about 10 people right now who all, just like the families that come to us, have different lived experiences. They have dealt with different diagnoses and each of us have had different resources and different knowledge. And so it really allows us to work with families from every circumstance and every need, because one of us has walked the walk they're walking. Yeah. And it's also so non-judgmental because all of us have had these experiences before, and we can just be a listening ear for people. We might not even offer someone a resource, and being able to talk to someone who's done it before, it's kind of like giving a rule book, the rule book that doesn't exist. Yeah. And it allows for an open space for people to just be themselves and let down their guard and really get the services that are going to be meaningful for their family.
Right. And lived experience is really what it says it is. These are it's people who have had issues with their kids, and even as adults. And by the way, I don't think it's normal for anybody to go through the entire lifespan without experiencing some sort of distress in terms of mental health. And so let's be real about that in terms of the stigma that exists. One of the things that I just want to get back to our 30th and lead in by saying there wasn't a dry eye in the house with some of the speeches that went on, and they all went back to this thing about how you share experiences with people, how you build community, how you build belonging. Because oftentimes parents are judged very harshly by people who are there but for the grace of God in the same position, right? And when your child is in the supermarket and is pitching a fit. I've had many of those experiences that people are looking at you thinking, why can't that person there control that child? Being involved in a community where you're accepted, being involved in a community that knows exactly what that's like and what it's about, and what the pathway out of that is so important. It came across in our 30th, didn't it?
It did. And, I think the other theme that, was so strong is a lot of people come to us and they're so isolated.
Right.
And I think all of the staff and all of the parents that were there and the speakers were really able to talk about that isolation that they felt and the judgment against them for the things that were happening in their families, and how, you know, they just didn't know what to do, what next step to take. And they found PIN. And, you know, it was so inspiring because, you know, all three of our parent speakers have gone on to have careers in human services or in, you know, lived experience roles. And it really started in, you know, becoming part of PIN and recognizing that they weren't alone, that people understood, you know, and that they were able to kind of carry on with that work. And that's really what happens.
Yeah.
You know, parents feel like, wow, somebody understands me and isn't judging me. And here I am, I can feel good about the work that I'm doing with my family and share that with another family. And that's the work.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And it is so important. And you know, I've worked in many fields in substance use disorder and mental health. And there are so many people who take that journey and survive that journey. And I use that word thoughtfully, actually. But part of their recovery and that part of their maintenance is that they want to give back, that they want to be involved so that they can show that journey. And I reckon that happens a lot more when they've had that kind of help, right? You're paying something forward for a couple of generations, yes. I think, in some ways.
Oh, very much so. And you know, a lot of times parents realize things about themselves through this work, you know, and through supporting their children. They realize, wow, I struggled with that as a child and I had no idea that it had a name, and it kind of validates them and their experiences, and then, you know, carries on with their children and hopefully, you know, gives them a better experience than they might have had in school or even in their own family. You know, they feel more understood.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I always say when I'm talking about this, when we talk about mental illness, when we talk about mental health issues, it is a disease, it's a chronic disease, but it has the best outcome measures of any other chronic disease. And I'm not saying that. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, says that. When you put it in those contexts, right, the optimism about this, when you say, and people have said this to me when I've been in difficult places, that there is, things will get better. You know, there is help and things will get better. And they do for the vast majority of people. And that hope and that optimism is a currency that you hold very precious, right?
Yeah, and I would really describe PIN as being the beacon of hope. You know, the pillar of hope, as we said. It really is an opportunity for people coming to us, but also, you know, being lived experience professionals. We're actually living experience professionals because, you know, this isn't something our children recover from. They are going to have ebbs and flows during their lifespan. And so this really, PIN really gives the opportunity to see hope. Even when there might be a setback, there's still hope. And I think that is the best part about PIN. And I would say that's why PIN has been able to withstand 30 years of, you know, changing politics and economics. You know, it's just something that holds hope, and that's really important.
It really does. 30 years is something amazing. It's funny, actually, when we opened the program, a couple of the VIPs were a bit late, so we were sort of spinning a little bit, and I got to talk about clothing, right, and how I'd had pieces of clothing for 30 years, longer than PIN, which is actually really amazing.
It really is.
But yeah, 30 years is an amazing time and period of time. You know, I said earlier on that parenting is a challenge for everybody. It's not just people that come to PIN. You know, every parent out there is thinking, yeah, there was a time when I felt overwhelmed. There was a time when, you know, I could have done something really terrible, but something stopped me from doing it. And then there's parents who have, and then they feel the remorse of that. The 21st century is a difficult time to parent.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Oh.
I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think back to Victorian days, that was probably quite difficult too, right? But you would think that all of these medical advancements and all of these technological advancements have really helped parenting. I'm not so sure about that. And the one thing that I'd love to talk about as we come upon the holidays, and we're going to be spending a lot of time with our family, what has technology done to the parenting dyad? I mean, it really has changed it.
It has. I mean, it's created a huge challenge for families, really. Everything from limiting time on devices, but, especially social media. I think things that happened much later for children are happening a lot earlier because of the access they have to social media sites. They're doing them, against the rules of the app,
Mm-hmm.
and joining 8 years younger than they might be. And, I see that bullying, happens. There's a, fear of missing out that happens. There's gang mentality, that you see with kids ganging up on other kids on social media. And I think while social media and the internet can be so useful because it can help us find resources, I think a lot of times when we don't even really know what our kids are accessing because they're at school on devices. Even if a child doesn't have a phone, they're still able to access the internet and all of these platforms. And I think as a parent, that creates a huge challenge because you just don't know what your children are consuming and how they're participating unless you're monitoring it 24/7.
And what's wrong with monitoring it?
Well, I mean, monitoring can be such a challenge too, because you want to give your kids autonomy, but you also want to be able to teach them. We as parents think, well, they look like adults, why aren't they acting like adults? But that's part of the parenting journey, is helping them learn to navigate things like social media and peer interactions and things like that. We're not built with those skills always, and social media has kind of taken some of those skills away from us because we're not interacting in person, and we say things, in social media that we would never say to someone's face. And I think, that just opens the door for a lot more challenges for parents, and being able to monitor kids is an important piece, but then also you have to let kids fly, and give them the opportunity to create some mistakes and to learn from those mistakes. So, I mean, it is a slippery slope.
Well, it's really difficult because I think the dignity of risk is such an important thing in raising children, and allowing them to fail, and allowing them to understand why they failed. But the stakes are so high, aren't they? Because everything is so available. I think about cyberbullying, and bullying used to happen just in schools, and it was terrible. It was terrible then, because that really does affect an adult's life, the way that if they were bullied at school. But now it's essentially the whole world who can sort of pile on. But I love that balance that you're striking. It's not all or nothing, isn't it? It's not like kids are never going to be looking at the internet. I mean, they are going to experience this supercomputer in their hand at some point, even if parents don't agree to give children. And I don't actually believe in that either, because that's another forbidden fruit, which then becomes, so this sort of idea, it's a little bit like Europe. And I always think about this when I emigrated here. Alcohol was seen as such an evil, and was so tantalizing for kids because they couldn't drink until they're 21. Europe has a totally different idea about that. It's this sort of introduction to, this is a thing that you can learn to live with. You don't have to, but you can learn to live with it. Same with the internet. I think, you allow people to experiment on it, but monitor. And somebody once said to me, trust and test. And that's so true, isn't it?
It is. And it's such an important part of parenting because, at birth, that's the beginning of raising our children to be independent. And so if we don't give kids the opportunity to test their skills and to see how they do, then they're going to get to a point and they're not going to know what to do. And this is the perfect opportunity from birth to 18 to let kids try things out and see how they do. And, as parents, we can give our kids grace. But, when you incorporate things like social media, the schools really aren't getting involved with things that happen with social media. When there's a negative thing happening, sometimes police get involved.
Yeah. Oh,
and kids don't understand the impact that it has and the repercussions that it can possibly have too. And I think it's such a good way to test out what your kids know and then fill in the blanks, because until you see them actually interacting, you don't really know how they're able to apply the skills of in-person social skills to, social media social skills. And so it's important to let them try things and be, the training wheels until they're ready to ride on their own.
Right. And when you think about the developing brain, those lobes don't come together. And really, I think it gets later and later with it. Seriously,
it's so true.
I do. And so judgment isn't something that you can overlay on a kid, right?
Right.
Because your experience and your developed brain knows. A great example of this is when I learned to drive, I would get parking tickets all the time. I never had a parking ticket since I was 30, I don't think, because it's like ripping a piece of your soul out.
Exactly.
But I would get these parking tickets at 18, 19, 20, and I would go, I'm not going to pay that. I had some magical thinking that it would just disappear, and it didn't. It doubled, and I knew that time and time again.
Yeah.
But that's a brilliant example, isn't it, of
Yes.
really your thought process not being together. So don't expect that judgment is something that your kids are going to be good at right from the get-go.
Absolutely not. And give yourself and your kids grace, because I think it's unfair to have the expectation that there's going to be no mistakes.
Right.
In fact, that's actually probably detrimental, right? To not ever make a mistake. How do you learn?
Wrapping someone in cotton wool, right?
Right, exactly. So, and I, having 3 young adults right now as a mom, that's the kind of stuff we're going through, is seeing, the repercussions of bad choices they've made, maybe not paying a ticket, and now it's $50 instead of $5, and those are the things that, really have an impact on you, so that you don't do them again. And I think that's true of kids in their lifespan, is they have to make the mistakes to learn from them.
That's right.
And hopefully they do, hopefully they're able to take a lesson from it.
Yeah, and most of them do if you allow them to do that.
Exactly.
So there's no answer to, we have to wrap up now, Heather. And it just, every time we meet, it seems like this was actually 18 minutes. It seemed like 3. But, I love the fact, I love the statement about grace, giving yourself grace, because we do judge ourselves because the whole world is looking. It feels like that sometimes. Brazelton, I went to see him once. He was an extraordinary human being. And somebody said, my kid gets in the bed every night, and he's 3.5, 4 years old, and I can't stop him. And Teacher Brazelton said, well, he won't do it when he's 15. And it was I just remember thinking, oh, yes, that's right. It will finish at some time.
Yes.
And I think you can apply that to parenting, right?
Every situation. They're not going to do it forever.
Right.
And that's, be patient as a parent.
So to all those parents out there, and all those aunts and uncles and people that care for kids, it's the holiday season is a wonderful season. It will be full of joy, but if it's full of tears, don't worry about it, because at the end of the day, you judge yourself on a lifetime of parenting, not one incident of saying, get out of my face.
Exactly. And remember, we've all been there.
Oh,
right?
Totally. My kids are in their mid-30s, and I'm getting to that point where will I stop yelling at them at some point? I'm just kidding. Heather, thank you so much for coming in, and hopefully a lot of people will get some great advice about parenting as ever, and hopefully you'll come back and we'll talk about this some more.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.